So who loves red velvet cake? Pretty much everyone. Or chocolate cake. The reason I want to pop on real quick is I'm making red velvet cake, and I wanted to talk about the importance of adding hot coffee when you are baking with cocoa powder. So in red velvet, there's cocoa powder. In chocolate cake, there's obviously cocoa powder. In brownies, there's cocoa powder. Use coffee, hot coffee, to enhance your chocolate flavor. So I've got all of my dry ingredients in my mixer here, and then I have some coffee. It can even be leftover coffee from that morning. Just heat it up. It doesn't need to be, this is super expensive coffee, as long as it tastes good. So you're gonna heat up your coffee and you're gonna slowly add it to your mixer with your dry ingredients that has the cocoa powder in it. And I'm always making sure that the coffee, when I'm making something with cocoa powder, is the first wet ingredient to go into my dry ingredients, so it hits the cocoa powder first and really enhances that flavor before I add my eggs or oil or buttermilk or vanilla or whatever it is I'm using in that particular recipe. So I'm telling you, not only does coffee taste amazing and smell amazing, because I am somewhat of an addict for coffee, it makes your red velvet cake, your chocolate brownies taste amazing. So if you haven't tried this, I highly, highly recommend it. I will pop back on in a minute and let you see how this turns out. Another thing we need to talk about is your eggs. When you are putting eggs into your cake batter, brownie batter, whatever it may be, you don't want to dump all of them in at the same time. So I have 6 whole eggs here, and I'm going to slowly add them to my mixer one at a time so that the whites and the yolk completely break up and get incorporated into my mix, instead of dumping them all in at once and maybe not noticing that some of the egg whites didn't fully mix in. And then when you take your cake out of the oven, you've got a white streak of egg whites in there. I've actually seen people do that. It is really gross looking. So don't do that. Add them one at a time. You don't have to make it to where they are completely disappeared out of your mixing bowl and you can't see any trace of eggs before you add the second egg, but you do want to make sure the yolk is broken up before you add your next egg, and that your mixer is continuing to beat through as you add those. So I tend to put my mixer on the lowest speed as I'm adding them, and then once they're all in, I do bump it up a notch just to make sure they're fully incorporated, and also making sure to scrape down your bowl really, really well. Also, on a red velvet cake, let's talk a little bit about the cocoa powder. It should not be as chocolatey as your chocolate cake, your devil's food cake. It should not. It should be kind of pale in color. See how this is definitely chocolate, but it's not like a super dark espresso brown. It's more of like what I would call a mocha color, because I only have 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder in here. Now, obviously it's gonna depend on what size batch of cake that you're making, but in today's batch, I'm just putting 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and then I'm gonna add that red food coloring. And that's another reason, it's not that you don't love the flavor of the cocoa powder, it's that you want the red food coloring to shine. And if this is too dark, you're gonna have to add twice as much of your red food coloring, and then your cake's gonna be almost a burgundy color, which is just a little dark for me. Unless your customer likes that, I would not suggest going that route. So I'm going to mix this. I've got my oil in here, my coffee, and my eggs. I also have a little bit of buttermilk that's gonna go in. Now I make my own buttermilk using whole milk, and you can either use white vinegar or lemon juice. Today I used lemon juice, that's what I had on hand right beside me, to make my own buttermilk, and that is so, so easy. If you have questions surrounding that, let me know. But basically, room temperature whole milk, or at least not super cold whole milk, a splash, basically a tablespoon of white vinegar or lemon juice, stir it up, and let it sit for 5 to 10 minutes on your counter so it really has time to set up and create that nice creamy, kind of chunky buttermilk look that you're looking for. It's a lot cheaper than buying it pre-made. So I'm gonna add those ingredients next, and then I'll pop back on when I add in my red food coloring so that you can see how much I think it's supposed to look like. Obviously, to each their own, but you don't wanna eat a ton of red food dye. It's just not good. And also, I almost forgot, I don't make a cake without sour cream. Now, I know this sounds a little bit weird, but it's gonna give you a nice, tender, moist cake with such yummy, good, healthy fats in it from the sour cream. And you can also use a plain, full-fat Greek yogurt and get the exact same result. Amazing. So do not forget to add your sour cream. I use a large ice cream scoop, and I have this measured out. I know what this is, so I use the same scoop for everything. And I just take a huge, big, fat scoop of that sour cream, so yummy, and add it straight into the mix. It is amazing. Now, if you have a recipe and you would like to incorporate sour cream into that recipe, I would advise you to lessen your other fat contents, like butter or oil, canola oil, whatever you're using in that recipe, because the fat from the sour cream is going to offset that a little bit. So you need to play around with that a little bit and kind of see how you want to alter the fats in your recipe. Okay, so let's talk about the food coloring. Now, for a red velvet cake, you don't have to have a super potent red food coloring because it's going to be baked. It's not like you're trying to make a vibrant red icing for Christmas. However, my tried and true absolute favorite food coloring is Americolor brand. It's a gel, and I get this super red. And I use this on my icing, my royal icing, my buttercream, my fondant, to get a Christmas red or a Valentine's Day red or a deep red or however much I want to add of this. So to this particular batch, I'm gonna add a 3/4 of a tablespoon is my guesstimate. I'll add that and then I'll look at it and see, and that should be plenty. I will say though, when you bake items and you've colored the baked good, it does tend to fade slightly in the oven. So you might wanna go like half a shade darker red than you want it to turn out. It'll lose some of its brightness, I guess I should say. It'll be more of a matte version of the color you're looking for. So beware when you're making like rainbow swirl cakes, all these different colors, it's gonna fade a little bit. So you always have to go just a tad brighter or darker than you think that you might need. So, like I said, I'm gonna do about 3/4 of a tablespoon. If I can get this lid open, there we go. Got a tablespoon measurement here, so I'm not gonna quite fill it up. Doesn't have to be exact. I can get it to come out of the bottle. There, that was disgusting. There we go. And there we go again. All right, I'm gonna say that's good enough. So it's not quite full. So I'm gonna dump this in. I'm gonna use my spatula here to get it all the way out of my little measuring spoon. And again, if you're not making very much, if you're making like a half batch of what I would consider this recipe to be, if you're making a half batch of this recipe or something along those lines, you may not need that much red. Okay, now it looks like my cake is bleeding to death. So I'm gonna mix this up and then I'll show you what it looks like in the end. Okay, I got it all mixed up and it is a great color red. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? It's gonna be great. So I'm gonna pop this in my cake pan, get it all greased and sprayed. I like to bake my cakes on convection settings. You don't have to do that. Just remember that you alter the temperature if you're doing convection versus non-convection. Lower the temperature if you're using convection by roughly 25 degrees. But if you are interested in this recipe, if you are interested in knowing more about how I do all of my baking, my decorating, my running a business out of my home, all of those things, organization, whatever it may be, shoot me a message and a comment on here and let me know. I work one-on-one with people. I call myself a cake coach, but really I'm just there for you to ask questions, to get recipes and get video tutorials from. We can talk and go more into detail about that, but really I'm there in your back pocket as you're learning and as you're growing your business or just a side hustle, or maybe you just want to learn this as a hobby, whatever it may be. I'm just there to kind of walk you through it and lend a helping hand. So go over, check out my other videos. Let me know if you have any questions, and happy baking.